Most people liked David. That was always the first thing people said about him.
He's easy to be around.
He never causes problems.
He's the nicest guy I know.
And for most of his life, David thought that was a good thing. He was the one who never argued. The one who said sure when someone suggested something. If the group wanted pizza, but he wanted sushi, pizza was fine. If someone wanted to meet earlier, earlier was fine. David was flexible, easy, low maintenance. But one evening, something strange happened. Someone asked him a simple question.
What do you actually want?
And David realized something unsettling. He didn't know. It didn't begin with a big moment. It started with something small. When David was younger, he noticed a pattern. Whenever he agreed with people, life became easier. Teachers liked him more. Friends invited him more often. Arguments disappeared faster. And slowly his brain learned a rule. Agreeing keeps things smooth. At first it seemed harmless. Let someone else pick the movie. Let someone else decide where to eat. Avoid unnecessary conflict. It made life easier. Over the years, that habit became automatic. Someone asked where to eat. Anywhere is fine. Someone asked what movie to watch. You choose. And every time he adjusted, the room stayed calm. No tension, no disagreement. But something subtle started happening. People stopped asking what David thought because they already knew the answer. The first uncomfortable moment happened at dinner. A friend looked at him and said jokingly,
David, you never have an opinion.
Everyone laughed. David laughed too, but the comment stayed in his mind longer than the joke. Because deep down, it felt true. A week later, it happened again.
David, do you actually like this restaurant?
David paused and realized something strange. He wasn't sure. Not because the food was bad, but because he hadn't chosen it. He rarely chose anything. And that thought made him uneasy. Then came the moment he couldn't ignore. He was sitting with friends on a Friday night. Someone asked the usual question.
Where should we eat?
Everyone started suggesting places. Then someone looked at him.
David, what do you want?
The question was simple, but his mind went blank. He opened his mouth, and nothing came out. The group laughed.
Come on, man. You must want something.
But the longer he thought, the more uncomfortable it became. Because for the first time, he realized something strange. He had spent so much time adapting to everyone else that he had stopped practicing, choosing for himself. And this is where many people quietly recognize themselves, not because they're weak, but because their brain learned that keeping everyone happy is the safest option. If stories like this feel familiar, you might enjoy this channel. Here, we explore the small habits and psychological patterns that quietly shape our lives. So if you enjoy these kinds of stories, then hit that subscribe button. Now let's look at what was actually happening inside his brain. Human beings are deeply wired for social acceptance. For most of human history, survival depended on being part of a group. Being rejected by your tribe didn't just hurt your feelings. It could mean losing protection, food, and safety. So the brain evolved systems that strongly encourage us to stay accepted. When people approve of us, the brain releases dopamine. Dopamine reinforces behaviors that lead to positive outcomes. If agreeing with people leads to approval, your brain learns, do that again. But when we sense disapproval, something else happens. A region of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex becomes active. This part of the brain processes social pain. And interestingly, brain scans show that social rejection activates many of the same regions involved in physical pain. In other words,
Being disliked literally hurts, so the brain searches for strategies to avoid that pain. One of the easiest strategies is agreement. Agree, approval, dopamine. Repeat the loop often enough, and the behavior becomes automatic. Eventually, you stop asking yourself what you want because your brain has learned that keeping the group comfortable is safer than expressing yourself. And slowly, your own voice becomes quieter.
after that dinner, David couldn't stop thinking about it. How many decisions had he outsourced? How many times had he said yes when he actually meant maybe or even no? At first, it didn't seem like a serious problem. Life had been smooth. People liked him. There was very little conflict. But another thought appeared. What if the cost of always being agreeable was slowly disappearing? Because if your choices always adjust to everyone else, your life eventually stops reflecting who you are. A week later, something small happened.
Can you help me move this weekend?
Normally, David would say yes immediately, but this time he paused. And during those few seconds, he asked himself a question he almost never asked.
Do I actually want to do this?
The answer surprised him.
Not really.
His chest tightened slightly. Saying no felt uncomfortable, but he said it anyway.
Sorry, I can't this weekend.
His colleague looked surprised for a moment, then shrugged, and that was it. No argument, no conflict, just acceptance. And something inside David shifted because he realized something important. The conflict he feared mostly existed inside his own mind. Over the next few weeks, he tried something new. Small choices, simple ones. When someone asked where to eat, he answered. When someone suggested plans he didn't like, he said so. At first, it felt awkward, like using muscles he hadn't used in years. But slowly, something returned. Preferences, opinions, edges, personality. Not perfect, not always comfortable, but real. And for the first time in a long time, David felt like he was participating in his own life again. Most people think losing yourself happens through big mistakes, big life changes, but often it happens quietly, one small compromise at a time, one sure after another, until one day someone asks you a simple question, what do you actually want? And you realize you haven't asked yourself that in years. But something else happens when you start choosing for yourself again. Not everyone likes it. Some people get uncomfortable, and that's when a new question appears. What happens when choosing yourself means disappointing someone else? That's where David's next story begins.